Hi, this is Dr. Claire, and today we're going to be talking about hormones in humans, some of the important hormone-producing glands within humans, and some conditions that are caused by hormones in humans. Of course, hormones are really important to the functioning of our body, and many diseases in humans are actually caused by hormone imbalances. So most hormones are actually controlled by a region of your brain called the hypothalamus that's found at the base of your brain stem. And the hypothalamus acts as the sensor for many of your negative feedback cycles in the body. And so as it's in its role as the sensor for your body in terms of regulating homeostasis, it releases hormones to trigger other parts of the body to then release hormones. So it actually will trigger other glands, other hormone glands in the body to release these different hormones. One of the glands that it has a very close association with is the pituitary gland, which kind of dangles off the bottom of the brain. The pituitary gland has two sections. One section which is made up of an endocrine gland, so it's endocrine cells, and then the back half of the pituitary is actually made up of nervous tissue. Both sides of the pituitary can release hormones, and some of the hormones that are released by the pituitary can stimulate other glands. So, for example, it releases follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, which are involved in ovulation and also in the regulation of female reproductive hormones. But it has some other hormones that it releases that are important in and of themselves for maintenance in the body. Not that those other ones aren't important, but they don't directly affect the whole body. So for example, the pituitary produces growth hormone, among other things. And of course, growth hormone is very important for regulating growth. If you do have some issues with the pituitary, that can trigger some conditions. So for example, some forms of giganticism and dwarfism are triggered either by an overproduction or an underproduction of growth hormone. Growth hormone is responsible for the growth of muscles and connective tissue and also functions to elongate bones. So you may have heard of one way that you can try and cheat at sports is to take human growth hormone. It makes your muscles grow bigger. But it's really, really not good for you because these things are supposed to be maintained at a homeostatic level in balance, and when you artificially elevate these types of hormones, it usually has other unintended consequences. This picture here is another example of an imbalance in growth hormone. This man, his name was Robert Wadlow. He's also known as the Alton Giant. He had a tumor in his pituitary that overproduced growth hormone. And so he's the tallest man to have ever lived because of that. He never stopped growing. Close to the point of his death, he was 8 feet 11 inches tall, so almost 9 feet tall. Unfortunately, because he was so large, the physiology of his body was unable to keep up with that large of a size. We're not adapted to be that large, and so he actually did pass away at the age of 22. All right. Thyroid gland, this is another gland that's very important. It's located in the middle of the neck, kind of where your Adam's apple is if you're a man. The thyroid gland secretes thyroid hormones. Thyroid hormones regulate your metabolism. So they regulate how quickly you burn and process things like carbohydrates and lipids. So this, of course, is very important for basic bodily function. We need to burn those calorie-containing compounds in order to stay alive and do human things. But if you have an imbalance in your thyroid hormones, that can have adverse effects. So you can either have what's called hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism. So hypo means too little. And when you have hypothyroidism, your gland is not producing enough hormones. It slows your metabolism down. You tend to have weight gain, lethargy, low body temperatures, and you kind of just feel blah. You don't have energy because you're not utilizing the things that you eat in order to make energy for your body because your metabolism is low. So you tend to see kind of a moon face appearance like this fellow here. Historically, when people were diagnosed with hypothyroidism, the treatment was to take a pig thyroid gland and grind it up and eat that. And so this man here was treated with that pig thyroid gland, and that sped up his metabolism, and he was able to recover. Hyperthyroidism is the opposite. That's when you produce too much thyroid hormone that speeds up your metabolism too much. It tends to cause weight loss, anxiousness, sleeplessness, anxiety. People who have hyperthyroidism often have a very characteristic kind of bug-eyed face and a goiter or a swelling in the neck. Usually that's because the thyroid gland is enlarged, and that's what's causing the overproduction of that thyroid hormone. Okay. Either way, too much or too little is not good. So again, this is one of those cases where it's best to keep it at a homeostatic level. It's kind of in between, and then you have the appropriate metabolism level. The pancreas is a really important endocrine gland. It actually has two major functions. It acts as an endocrine gland to regulate the storage and release of sugars. It also acts as an exocrine gland. An exocrine gland is something that is connected with a duct to some other structure. So usually it can be connected with a duct to the intestine or connected with a duct to the surface of your skin, whatever. It's connected to somewhere where it's going to secrete something that then goes down the duct and into wherever that is. So as an exocrine gland, the pancreas secretes digestive hormones that help you to digest your food. So it's really important in that regard too. So it's important for digestion and regulation of blood sugar levels, blood glucose levels. And it regulates blood glucose levels by releasing two different hormones, one that releases sugar into the blood and one that takes sugar out of the blood. So those two hormones are insulin and glucagon. Insulin stimulates the uptake of sugar from the blood and stores it as glycogen in the liver or as fat in fat cells. So when you eat food, and you digest that food and you absorb that food through the lining of your intestine, that sugar that you've just eaten is going to go into your bloodstream, and having elevated blood sugar levels is actually quite dangerous. Normally your body would then produce insulin. That insulin would trigger cells in your liver and cells in your fat cells to take that sugar out of the blood and store it in other forms in those tissues. Glucagon, on the other hand, is a different hormone that when your blood sugar gets low, it's released, and it will stimulate the liver or the fat cells to release that sugar back into the blood, because your brain can only run off sugar. Your brain can't run off any other nutrients. You need to have high enough blood sugar to power your brain. So if your blood sugar starts to get low, it releases that glucagon, and then your brain gets the food that it needs, which is important. Okay? So there's a disease that is involved with blood sugar regulation, and that's diabetes. It's one of the most common diseases in the country. And basically, people who are diabetic cannot take up glucose from the blood. And there's two reasons why that can happen. Type 1 diabetes is caused by damage to the pancreas, to the cells that produce the insulin in the pancreas. We don't always know why that's triggered, but it's usually something that comes on in childhood. So sometimes it's called childhood onset diabetes or something like that. And in that case, you physically cannot produce insulin, and so you don't have a way to get the sugar out of your blood. And so people who have type 1 diabetes is usually treated by injecting themselves with insulin so that they have that hormone in their bloodstream and the sugar can be taken up and stored like it would normally be. Of course, if you are a type 1 diabetic and you accidentally inject too much insulin, you can take up too much sugar, and this is something that type 1 diabetics have to be very careful about. They often will carry an apple or a candy bar, so if they accidentally give themselves too much insulin, they can get their blood sugar levels back up very quickly, because it's very, very dangerous for the brain. You can pass out and lose consciousness if you don't have enough sugar for your brain. So it's really important that they have those things with them. Type 2 diabetes is more common. And type 2 diabetes actually isn't a problem with the production of insulin. Type 2 diabetes is when you have a low number of insulin receptors in the cells in your liver and in the cells in your fatty tissues. And so you are producing a bunch of insulin to get that sugar out of your blood, but the cells aren't responding. And so without those receptors, they can't mount a response, and then you end up with elevated blood sugar. And if you end up with elevated blood sugar, regardless of if it's because of type 1 or type 2, you can get what's called ketoacidosis, which is a very dangerous condition where you have ketones build up in your bloodstream. And then that can lead to things like blindness, heart damage, loss of appendages. It's kind of nasty. You want to be very careful. Type 2 diabetes, you can't inject with insulin because injecting with more insulin would just mean there's more insulin in the system. There's already insulin in the system. It's not that there's no insulin, it's that the cells aren't responding. So usually type 2 diabetes is treated instead with exercise and diet. So type 2 diabetics have to be very careful not to eat foods that contain a high amount of sugar that's going to easily go into their blood. And oftentimes exercise will reverse the condition and allow those cells to become more receptive again. One last hormone gland that I want to talk about are the gonads. So the gonads are the ovaries and the testes. So those structures are our reproductive structures, and they also produce the hormones that regulate reproductive development. So you've probably heard of the hormones like estrogen and progesterone. Those are typically female hormones, and testosterone, which is typically a male hormone. Because they're typically female and typically male does not mean that females do not have any testosterone and males do not have any estrogen or progesterone. It just means that they're present in lower levels. And they can actually be converted back and forth between the two because they're actually very similar compounds. So women tend to have higher levels of estrogen and progesterone and lower levels of testosterone. Men tend to have higher levels of testosterone, lower levels of estrogen and progesterone. And those hormones regulate the features that we recognize as male or female. So the development of genitalia, facial hair, things of that nature. These hormones are really important for sex determination and also behavior. All right, so that is the end of my lecture on hormones in humans, and I'll catch you next time.